this evening, so that if there are students who weren't able to join us for this time, they can do that in a little while. And so I think I've introduced everyone, and Kate sent us some questions that you guys probably had a chance to look over. So I'm gonna just, I didn't really give the gentlemen, the three doctors, any specific script or anything about this evening. I just wanted you all to be able to ask questions and listen to their expertise and knowledge. And so Dr. Shaw, Dr. Poyser, either of you want to introduce anything? Or just start out by taking questions.
Shawn, I can go ahead and start if you want, and then I'll let you follow up. So a little bit about my background, for those of you who don't know me. I was a math teacher for 7 years, and I was a middle school principal for 8 years, and then I got into the superintendency for 5 years at both Crane and at Aurora, and so smaller school districts. And so when, and I've had the opportunity to teach this class a couple different times, but when thinking about school facilities and really more master planning, as a superintendent of a small district, we basically had no plan. And that's not really the direction that you want to go and have as a superintendent. But it was one of those line items within our budget that we weren't very proactive about. We weren't forward thinking about our facilities, and it was always easy to not budget for those things and then do things as they came up. And so at small districts, you then tend to be reactive, and a lot of times you fund what should be normal annual capital projects, but you tend to fund those with bond issues because you then lump a bunch of things together. And so not the way you need to do it, but when funds are limited, you focus on people and you focus on education and keeping the lights on and not the big projects. And so I've seen that extreme to where we really didn't budget very much money. And now that I'm in Springfield, and those that are on the call that have been a part of Springfield, have kind of seen the opposite. And so we, the year prior to me coming, they actually went through a very large facility master planning, brought in an outside entity to actually evaluate all of the facilities within our district, give all of the facilities different scores based on condition, suitability, technology ready, site, to essentially determine needs. And so from there, a multitude of steps took place in order to get to where we are right now. And in April of 2019, passed a $168 million bond issue, which is really basically phase 1 of 3. And so, and that will, if all 3 of those phases come to fruition based on support from the district, it'll be 2030 before all of that's taken place and accomplished. And so we have a great facility master plan in place. There's direction, there's strategy, but it's also one of those things that you can't, especially in a district the size of Springfield, where we have nearly 60 buildings, you can't ever become complacent. And that's part of the problem that I think Springfield in the past had gotten to. They got complacent. And so then even though we have 300, well, actually closer to $500 million worth of projects that need to get completed within 10 years, we're going to then be dealing with facilities that are at that time 70 years old still, that weren't on any of the project lists. So you can't ever get complacent. You always have to be forward thinking. You always have to be thinking what's next, and really what needs to be taken care of when it comes to your facilities, and have that plan in place and really involve a lot of people in that process. So that's kind of where my background has been and my experience with just in the last few years dealing with facilities. So I'll turn it over to Shawn if he wants to add to that.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Shaw. I tell you what, you talk about right on the money there. Just real quick background for me about me. I was a teacher, coach, athletic director, those kind of things for 13 years, 8 as a principal. I did the middle school principal thing as well, and I think you did that at my alma mater. We didn't get to work together, Dr. Shaw, but I knew about you and heard so many good things about you, so I'm not surprised you're in your position and doing well. So when you're middle school principal, you're on the doorsteps of heaven. Basically, there's not much more left, yeah. And then this is my 8th year as superintendent 3 at Lynn. That was my first job. Most of my career has been in Southwest Missouri, and this is my 5th year at Warsaw. But to reiterate a little bit on these smaller rural districts, the same thing here. Not to just tell you all the sorrows or whatever, but Dr. Shaw's correct. It's real easy to spend that money other places, and salaries and benefits are a big part of your budget. So we'll put that off, and we'll put it in a bond. Or some districts, and this is what happened here, they did a lot of lease purchases, and we were paying out of our operations, and it was killing our budget, and things were falling apart. And you got to look ahead, right? Before you know it, those buildings catch up with you, and you're looking at 70, 80, 9-year-old buildings. My first year as a superintendent is kind of unusual. At Lynn, we had some bonding capacity, and we passed a bond and built a new elementary. It was kind of unusual, for a first-year guy to get involved in something like that. It was kind of a no-brainer. Sometimes you just need an outside person to come in with a fresh set of eyes. And Dr. Henson, I know he'll speak, and he's a unique person to be in a district that long and that much growth, and go through the whole process. It's pretty fascinating, really. But we just passed a bond ourselves at the same time Springfield did, about $162 million less. But it was really important for us. And when you do those things right, like they have, and like Dr. Henson did, man, you build a lot of community support there and pride. And if you do that right and you plan, but I would say just real quickly, that's got to be one of the first things you do when you take over a building or you take over a district. There's a lot of places like Dr. Shaw and I have been where, hey, there's not been a plan. And so you better get going on that, because it'll catch up with you fast. And it's a lot more expensive, right? That pay me now or pay me later. It's a whole lot more expensive, pay me later. So I'll let the guru, Dr. Henson, a guy I worked with, hired me, and I appreciate that, hired me again. And I work with Dr. Grover. She's as good as they get. And so I appreciate having me on tonight with such really a great crew. So thank you, guys. See if Dr. Henson's, I think he's on.
There we go. Sorry I'm late, folks. I had to reboot the whole system. One of the joys of farm living, electric went out just long enough to shut everything down completely. So we're up and running again. Had to jump in and out a couple times. But as I was trying to say there, I hired Dr. Poyser, and I was Dr. Shaw's mentor. So I've known both these yahoos for a long time. Dr. Grover, did you get the answers to the questions? I typed them up and sent them to you. And I didn't know if you were going to share those with your students, maybe kick off some conversation or.
Right. I did receive those. I have not shared them. We had just sort of had some introduction. Can you hear me now?
Nope.
No, still not.
No. Can
the rest of you hear me? Okay. I don't know why we're not hearing one another.
Lord knows. It's probably part of the reboot thing, Kathy. I don't know what's going on.
That's okay. I will let me open that document and I'll share it on the screen while you talk.
Okay. We can do that, I think. And I'm recording us. I don't know why or how.
I am.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay. There's Travis. Are we back on here now, me?
Yep, you're
Hello?
still
Somebody
on.
wave your hand. Okay, good. Like I said, we're just trying to get this things up and running again. I don't know what these fellas have said, but let me tell you my general philosophy of facilities is that it better be something you take great pride in, and it better be something that's on your mind all the time. Kathy, have you ever told them the Harold Chappell story?
No.
Okay. Dr. Harold Chappell taught facilities back when I was in Principal 101 with Fred Flintstone. And Harold liked to tell the story that he was hired at a school in Colorado that was really doing poorly, had a lot of trouble, had a lot of poor performance, a lot of suspensions. I mean, it was just a mess. You guys all know there's districts that are a mess. He was hired in, I think, as the superintendent. And he said the first year he spent about $10,000 on landscaping. He really cleaned the place up and made it look great. They were still rotten to the core, but on the outside it looked great. And he said it bought him 1 full year of peace and quiet from the community so he could work on the inside of the building and get things fixed. So never underestimate the power of good, clean landscaping. Just today I saw a Facebook post of people oohing and eyeing over a gorgeous red tree. Kathy, you'll probably remember the time that Benji and I wrote that grant and redid all the trees out in front of the red building. That's the one they were admiring. So it's important to know that you may do something that may not pay fruition for a long time in facilities. But I guarantee you, somebody's going to go by Clever School District and that old 1927 building with that gorgeous red maple out in front and say something to somebody, wow, this place really looks sharp. That's a beautiful tree. Folks, that's a positive vote right there. I'm telling you, you just got to think about things like that. I went through the list of questions that you guys had and tried to put some answers on there. I think that number one is critical for principals. You're not going to affect a lot of what your building is, but you can sure affect what it is not. You know, a principal can kill a bond issue almost as fast as your PAT teacher who's out there in the houses every day. I think it's so critical that you have good staff, you have custodians who think it's the greatest building in the world, whether it's 100 years old or brand new, and they take care of it and they take great pride in it, and that rubs off on teachers and that rubs off on kids. And when that happens, you get increased student performance. I don't care what happens. So I just think it's really important that you get a staff on there as a principal. That's really where you're going to have the greatest effect, I think, is taking great pride in that building and make sure everybody is proud of what you have and you're doing what you can with it. Dr. Shaw probably already told you when he was in Crane, he had gosh, I can't remember, Travis, how many different wings were added on over the years, and none of them were the same. And
I think there had been 4 additions, and the building kind of started in the middle, and then it somewhat like spider legs, there was all these different offshoots. And Dr. Henson joked about it, but it was really true. He would bring his school facilities class there to take tours because he wanted to show them a good example of a building and a district where there was absolutely no future planning, no strategic planning in place when it came to building a building. And so it was a maze from one end to the other because there were so many different additions that were put in place.
Correct. And how did that affect performance? That building was clean, it was sharp. Those teachers knew they were in an old building and they did workarounds, whatever they took. And we were in SWCL together, and there were a lot of years that Crane kicked our butt, not only on the ball court, but in classes and testing and everything else. Those teachers took great pride in their building. It's almost like they took it as a challenge to say, you know what, we're going to rise above this. That's principals work there. That's superintendent. That's people out there taking great pride in their buildings. Say, this is what we have. We're going to make the best of it. We're going to make our kids the best they can be. And you always saw that at Crane. I mean, we never went in there and put them down. We just said, look, this is a building that was built in pieces over decades, but the teachers really worked through it. And it's because they had, and they still have great staff down there who take great pride in what they do. And so I think that's my 1B is I think you've got to be supportive of your PDC people. You have to have great teachers who, no matter what you throw at them, are doing a great job. I mean, I'm hearing great things about some of the stuff that you're looking at me. I can barely get this thing turned on, but I hear teachers out there every day who have just said, you know what, we're having to do online and in class and the mix and match, and we'll just go. And they run with it. those are great teachers. You know what I mean? That's what your building needs, is good teachers. I mean, it sounds back-asswards, but it's the truth. The second one, I think, Travis, you talked about a little bit already, and that's how often do we talk about buildings? We talked about buildings all the time at Clever. But we were in a district that was in Christian County, which was either the first or second, depending on which year it was, fastest growing county in the state of Missouri, outside of St. Charles, one or the other. So some years we had as high as 14% growth 1 year. So we never not talked about where stuff went, where buildings were going to go, what we were going to do next. It was just always on there. So I think those things have to be a continual discussion all the time.
Hey, Dick, let me add something to that. Yeah. Something that I hadn't been a part of until I came to Springfield. And every year, and it's during the month of September, we have our what we call our capital planning process. And it's the opportunity for all of our senior leadership members, which are our directors and principals, to submit requests for capital improvements or capital purchases for their building. And my first year here, this is my 4th year now with Springfield, we had over 700 submissions for capital projects in the district. So you can imagine how difficult that was to get through and actually evaluate. And as we've educated our principals and directors through this process, this year we had just a little over 300. And so they're recognizing really the type of things that they need to be submitting and the needs that the district really has. And we've been able to really streamline that process. But you mentioned how we talk about it all the time. And these are things that they look at and evaluate their buildings daily basis. And then they have this opportunity annually to submit this. Now, obviously, there's maintenance and things that goes on throughout the year. But anything that would be considered capital, we do have that process in place. And then we're actually able to get that list verbally approved around December, to where we begin the process of putting out bids and all of that work that has to get done in January and February in order to be able to do those projects over the summer. And so it's really become a much better process, and it's been a lot of people working together collaboratively to get that process where it is. But regardless if that's a process you use or something else, but it needs to be something that is discussed and talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, I love it. And it sounds like the people in the trenches who are out there every day, because there's no way you're going to look at every square inch of those facilities in Springfield. I mean, right. How long would it take you just to go through and tour them all? Those folks are right there in the trenches every day and see what's going on.
Yeah. Those building leaders, that's a huge piece. You guys see that, you recognize the need, you hear from your teachers. And right. So you're the ones that need to be able to recognize and really, in a sense, fight for your facility in order to get the things that you need.
Right.
At Warsaw, it's the opposite of Clever. Where Clever had the great growth there in Christian County, we lost 200 kids in the last decade. We're at 1,200, we were at 1,400. So, you talk about a big loss of revenue, and this is so crazy. I've shared this with Dr. Henson. We had 3 elementary schools with 1,200 kids. And 362 square mile district is crazy. So our budget was a mess when I got here, and that's one thing we did. We closed an elementary. Now we have an elementary 10 miles south of town with 120-some kids K through 5. I've got an elementary in town, 350 kids K through 5. So there's some issues there, and then there's some culture issues where, those folks south of town, boy, they do not want to lose that 70-year-old elementary that's hardly got any kids in it and is falling apart. So those are other issues. Well, just the flip side, I've kind of seen it all, but so then you got to navigate your way, of course, through that.
Right. But Shawn, don't you agree that whether you're going up fast or down fast, it's vitally important to have all the stakeholders involved in that? I mean, if you just walked into a board meeting one day and say, you know what, I'm closing a school, you'd been strung up and burned in effigy the same night. It just was not happening.
Absolutely. And I said just before you got on, that's probably the first things you do. A lot of these places don't have a plan. It's the first thing you do. And you can walk in a district just like you said, and kind of what you need to do, but you can't do that right away. You know, like you said, so we put those committees together, and I think you get the mayor, you get the chamber of commerce, all those major players. You got to figure out who they are, right? And
that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
There's somebody out there that they don't like your plan. You're dead in the water, and you've got to find that person. that's part of your job, I think, as a school administrator, whether it's principal or superintendent. You need to know those people.
Absolutely.
Yep. And be out there with them. I'm still looking at my list here. And talk about it all the time. That's one of the things I think I'd stress, and I'm probably repeating myself, that it's okay, I'm old, I do that. This is part of what's going on all the time, is your discussion about our facilities and what we have. Do we have too much? Do we have not enough? Do we need to change? I think you have to be careful, like these fellows said. You don't want to just rush out and buy all the latest and greatest, and you need teachers who know how to use that, and can we use that? And all those things are part of it. It has to be an ongoing conversation, just like your MAP scores in the spring. Have it to be an ongoing conversation if you're going to make a difference. Roll me on down a little, Kathy. This is where I may differ for some people. I'm not real big on building level facility committees. I think those people need to be concentrating on other more important parts of their job, things they do every day, 8 to 5. But I do agree with Dr. Shaw that if you have principals that are in the know, district leaders that are in the know, who are really working closely with their faculty, they're the ones who should be bringing that back. I'm not as interested in faculty worrying about building at this point. I really want them to worry about being great teachers, because then we can overcome what we have or what we want. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of my philosophy on that one. But now, when you get ready to build a building, that's another side story. Everybody has to be involved, if at all possible. I don't know how you do that in Springfield, Travis, because there's so many people, but everyone that plan impacts should have eyes on that plan at some point.
Yeah, the administration and the staff are heavily involved in the in different levels of design of the building, primarily the building principal. There's a fine line of what we found that when you want to involve your staff of the building in that process, because if you get them in too soon, they get too far into the weeds, they really hinder progress through design. That's right. But yet you need to be able to give them what we found is get through schematic design and then get into about 50% of design development, to where we can then show the staff where the building is, and then we gather feedback from them at that point on things that they like and dislike, to where we can still make changes. It doesn't impede progress. And of course, we front load all of that by saying, we're here to get your input and we're here to get your feedback. But what you need to understand right up front is that we will not be able to do everything in this building that you want to do. Exactly. And so you need to understand that up front, because we found the hard way that when that is not front loaded properly, then you get the attitude that you want our feedback, but yet you're not even listening to us. And so they have to understand up front that we value their feedback, we want their feedback, but we cannot do everything. And so now, we generally speaking will not involve community members and other stakeholders in that design process. Now, we have had one neighborhood within our community where they were very active, they were very vocal, and we did allow some feedback and input from them. And it was just a specific situation where it was a historic part of Springfield. We felt like it would benefit that particular project, and it's turned out to work out okay. But for the most part, we don't get parents involved in the design, because as you know, everybody's going to have a different opinion on what they want, and you'll never make everybody happy. And so you hire those professionals, you hire those architects, you have them work through the mission of the district, you have them work through the program of the building itself, and you let them use their gifts and their talents to get you the building that is beautiful, but yet also meets the needs of the school and the community in which you're building it. So
I think that's absolutely right. You can get so many irons the fire, you'll never get anything done, and it will be an absolute hodgepodge. But I do like the fact that you bring somebody in when you get in that 50% design phase, so you've got the basic form down, but maybe not right down to the level of detail yet, and have people look at it. Because when we built our high school, we went through that same process, about that same phase. And one of the custodians was sitting there looking at it, and he said, well, where am I going to get this? Where am I going to get that? Well, we hadn't even realized it, and none of the architects hadn't realized it. But the only place to restock toilet paper was clear on one end of the building. So anytime this guy would get to a bathroom at 11 o'clock at night and they were out of toilet paper, he had no choice but to go clear to the other end of the building to get toilet paper and back. Based on his input, we put in at least one more, maybe two more custodian closets. Not full big things, but we already had a space set aside for electric panels. Well, we broadened that a little bit so we could put some supplies down there to make their job easier and make them more efficient. They were happy. I was happy. It didn't cost us any money. But you're right. If we'd have done all that early on, we never would have got to that point.
Yeah, Dr. Henson, I told it, and Dr. Shaw, I think you guys are right on the money. This is now the other night at the board meeting, you'll get a kick out of this. So, in fact, I haven't told you this, Dr. Shaw. I shared your story on KY3 with our board here a while back. It's a very similar thing. We had the bond premium come under bid, so we're able to do more things. So we've got about $1 million. We're trying to figure out what to do. It's a great problem to have, right? So we're going back to our wish list. I got a board member. Well, let's ask the teachers. Well, keep in mind, I'm married to one, and I said, now nothing against them. Remember here, I said, but they're going to want more computers. They're going to want textbook, and they should. They're teachers. You know, just what Dr. Henson was saying a minute ago. That's what they need to be concentrating on. I said, this is a capital projects thing, right? Let's don't lose sight of that. But they'll think of things when you're down to that point where you're ready to, dot the I's and cross T's. They'll, the fax teacher probably knows what needs to be in the fax room, right? And the PE teacher knows how the locker room should look, and those kind of things within reason, of course. But teachers don't need to be I totally agree. They don't need to be in a building committee. They got other things they need to be doing, just like we've got things we need to be doing.
But does your building principal know what the enrollment trends are in the fax department? If that's a growing, strong department, or do we have 3 people out there who are hiding from the coach? I mean, I don't know. Every school is different in that respect. We're not going to put in a solid gold facility for a program that's going away, or do we want to boost that facility up and maybe try to bring in a stronger person to build that program? Out here in the country, we build strong ag shops. You've been in 2 or 3 of them because it's a strong component. It's a big piece of what we do out here. And Travis may not have as strong an FFA program, although I think they got a lot of great things going up there. But you have to look at your own district. What do you need? And that's really, I think, where a building principal has to be in tune and really in touch with what's going on in his community and in his building to help guide that kind of thing.
You bet.
Okay. Question 5, how often and by what methods do you communicate? All the time.
Yeah.
I just think it needs to be a regular part of the conversation on what we're doing, what we're not doing. And it doesn't matter if you're a 1A school or if you're the largest fully accredited school district in the state or whatever Springfield calls themselves nowadays. They still have facility needs, and people need to be thinking about it all the time. When are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? I mean, it's part of the conversation. I've always said that when you present a bond issue, it's a surprise to the community, you might as well flush it in the toilet. Because if you do get a pass, you're going to have a lousy product.
So I think you bring up some great points, and I know there's a couple on here from currently in Springfield and had been at Springfield, but prior to me coming on, I'd been hired, I believe it was January, February, and then we ran the bond issue in 2017 and it didn't pass. And then, so we had to reboot and we had to figure out what it was that we were going to do differently by getting feedback from everybody, but then also that communication piece. And so I think that was one of and they may speak to this a little differently or have their thoughts on it, but I think when we did the bond campaign this last time, we had a clear, consistent presentation. The message was concise and clear, that we made a commitment to provide to every single one of our schools what was being on the bond issue, as well as their parent organizations, and then, of course, community organizations throughout the city. And I think in all total, I think we gave about 155 presentations during the 3 or 4 months leading up to the bond issue. And that presentation was consistent, 100% consistent, no matter who gave it. Our senior leadership team, they were provided training on the presentation so that no matter who was giving that presentation, it was always the same. And so I think that was a huge piece in the fact that we made sure that we didn't want to take for granted who would need the information and who would actually get the information. We gave it to schools that there was absolutely nothing going to be on the bond issue that affected their school at all, but yet we wanted to make sure that everybody had it. And so I think that was a huge, huge factor in this bond issue passing in 2019 that didn't pass in 2017, because the things that I heard after I came on board was that people just didn't know what it was. They didn't know everything about the bond issue. And these were people within our own district. So if our own staff didn't know exactly what was going to be on the bond issue and what all the money was going for, you can guarantee there were people throughout the community that didn't know either. And so when people don't know, then they tend to vote no.
That is absolutely right.
You bet.
I'd agree with that 100%. That message is consistent across the board. I think that's probably the biggest jump you made on that one, Travis, really.
Dr. Henson?
And I think getting your staff on board and being a building principal, having that buy-in, because in a lot of these places, if the staff's not going to support you, you're done, aren't you? I mean,
yeah.
It's over.
Yeah. When we built the high school in Clever, which was a major step in that small community, it's the first time we broke onto a different campus. It was just huge for a small town. And I will tell you, heads up, that my PAT staff probably got us as many votes as I did standing out there making presentations, because they were in those homes with mom and dad, and they could tell you that message. They were clear on what we were doing, how we were doing it, why we were doing it, and how it would positively impact parents as teachers. It was a high school, how it all ripple effect worked down. I mean, that message was top to bottom in every house, the same thing, like Travis was saying. Consistent message across the board to make sure everybody knows.
Gentlemen, could we go back and look at question 4 regarding the short-term and long-term facility plans? I know in our textbook that we've been relying on heavily this semester, they do talk about, having that long-range plan, but then you also have, okay, what are the more immediate short-term issues that we have to deal with? And so just a little bit of information on that. We sort of skipped over that one.
So I can kind of share what we're doing now, and I really feel like, as I mentioned before, that I think our strategies and our process have gotten much better. Our director of facilities, Shawn came from Neosho and had been there for many years, and he came in a year before me, but he leads up this work. But from a short-term standpoint, as I stated before, we have that annual, what we call it the FYCA, fiscal year cycle approval process. And so for us, we have that short-term annual. And so I think that's something that people maybe don't think about, short-term being annually, but that's really for us when we're planning facility-wise, that is the short-term. That's the short-term planning. And then for the long-term planning, many schools may use this. We use a software called School Dude, but within School Dude, we have a module called, it's Capital Forecast is what it's called. And so we spent about a year implementing and inventorying every single thing within our district from a capital standpoint, from roofs to HVAC to parking lots to playgrounds to any of those things that would have to cycle out. And so, and we put life cycle data on all of those to where every single year now, we don't have to figure out, okay, what's next in line. We budget a certain amount of money every year to replace roofs. And then we go to that module and it tells us, okay, these roofs are 25 years old and they're next in line. Now, we obviously do field observations, but that is a long-term, long-range planning tool that we use that helps us to understand and know, okay, from the capital side, what's next. And then as far as the facility management and the facility master plan, we talked about that, how we really have 10 years from now a plan leading out on those facilities, and Springfield actually put together a community task force on facilities of people throughout the entire community, and spent 5 months prior to the initial bond issue going out, looking at data, looking at all of the information provided to them, and then made their recommendation to the school board on what they felt like needed to be done. But that was a process that now has played out in the equity and diversity work that's been going on in Springfield. It's now playing out in a transportation expansion process. And so, but they were the ones who really gathered the data. They spent the time, and there was buy-in from the community, but they helped to develop essentially that long-range plan for facilities in Springfield. Now, that doesn't always mean that you have to go that route with a group like that, but you have to be thinking, especially if you're in a larger district and you have multiple buildings, you've got to be thinking 1 and 3 and 5 and 10 years down the road, and properly budget for that, or it'll never get done.
I think it's absolutely true. And I think that's true, Travis, in every size of district. You have to know what you have, you have to know its lifespan, and you have to be looking down the road. And that's whether you're going up or down. I mean, Shawn just can't wake up tomorrow and decide to close the elementary buildings if their enrollment drops again. All that has to be in a plan somewhere, how we're going to deal with it. And I tell you, I don't think you said a truer word all evening than knowing the lifespan of all of your pieces of equipment. And that's true. I don't care how big or how small the district is. If you wake up one day and you got a roof that fell in and you wonder how come, buddy, you're failing at your job. Like you said, you need to know the age of that equipment, what its expected lifespan is, and continually monitor that and budget for it. And then these things don't come up as a surprise. I'm not talking tornadoes or something.
And it's not always been that way. I mean, I think it was in 2006, there was a bond issue that was passed in Springfield, and a big part of that bond issue was air conditioning in schools.
Right.
And replacing air conditioning. And that is not the best way that you need to be replacing HVAC systems, because you can't rely on bond issues. And so you have to be able to know when those things are coming due, because you don't want to be reactive on those things, because then you have buildings without heat and air conditioning.
Yeah, that's a bad way to be. When Junior comes home freezing, you don't have a happy mama, you don't have anybody supporting your next project. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's right. I think the answer was right on the money. I think Dr. Henson and we did the same thing. We didn't know what we had. It was all falling apart, and or seemed like it was. So yeah, then you can budget those things. Those are great points. And I think short term is annual. I look at it the same way. What's my budget this year, right? And then long term is 5 years or whatever. Maybe it's 10. Maybe it's 3. But I look at short term as annual as well. That's how we try to look at it.
And then some goals out, like you said, like Travis said, if you have a 3, 5, and 10-year plan that you can work on piece by piece, knowing you're going to work up to a bigger chunk, you're money ahead. We started football here at Clever right by the time I retired. And when we put that track in, we put all the drainage in and all the conduit in for turf underneath there. Costs us a lot more money than just dirt, but it's going to save a ton in the long run when they do finally decide to come back and turf that. So some pre-planning, because they knew what the long-range plan looked like. We can spend a little extra here to save a bunch down the road. That's what Travis is talking about. Lifespan stuff, knowing where you're going, then you can appropriately spend your money and get the most for the money. You got to be stewards of the public's money here. You can't just go out and blow it willy-nilly. So I think Dr. Shaw's spot on with that module plan.
You bet. And
kudos to Springfield. I agree with you. I mean, I've been around this area for a long, long time and seen a lot of school districts that I thought were just haphazard in their approach, and they went nowhere until they finally got organized and got streamlined. Some of the very things you're talking about here with a plan, then they went forward all the way. It's just, I don't think you can overstress that importance.
I agree. Now, those of you that are going to be building principals, we break it down a little bit here too, to help you guys, we're kind of talking, like superintendents, but as a building principal, now we're looking at desk, which may turn into tables, right, anymore. Also, we're looking at we've got a plan on our technology, not just the infrastructure, but rotating those. So you guys are running your building. How am I going to need new chairs, or new desks, or cafeteria tables? And so we're prioritizing. We got a plan for that. A textbook rotation. Those kind of things. As a building principal, that's what you can do to really help yourself and your boss.
Right.
And that stuff comes.
I tell you, that's where we let faculty get kind of involved in some of our plans too. As we got down to putting together furniture orders, we really spent a lot of time talking to teachers. What do you want? Do you want tables? Do you want chairs? Do you need stools? And there were some things that are out there. Say, have you looked at these? Those convertible things that can make the circles, or you can spread them out and make squares. The furniture that can be moved around. A lot of those things I don't think any of them had ever seen. So yeah, that's a good place, I think, to get people involved in the project too.
And it's a large investment when it comes to replacing those things, all of our, these buildings on our bond projects, all of the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment is part of that. And, we just in an elementary school that might be 60,000 square feet, 350 kids. Right. I mean, we're budgeting, between $500,000 and $600,000 just for the furniture piece of it. Right. And so, those will last a long time, right. But then you have to be able to replace that. So right.
My old story on that was my first superintendent would buy a $2 folding chair and then try to get the custodian to weld it when it broke by Christmas time. So the first thing I did when I got a hold of the budget was start buying $10 chairs that lasted 10 years instead of $2 chairs that lasted 6 months. I felt like it was a good investment. But it's funny, that was a re-education process for the community and for the board. Why are you spending so much on them chairs? You've got to rethink how you're approaching this. But that was always one of my great stories there. Poor Lindsay out there in the ag shop trying to patch up a chair that was made out of tinfoil. Nikki, don't tell Shaylin that she broke any chairs. We'll never let that out. We're not being fresh. Nikki happens to be best buds with one of my favorite students from the olden days when I was still classroom teaching. We'll say that Shaylin's a lot older than you, Nikki. That way it doesn't sound so bad.
Yes, just a few years.
I think that this topic, your conversation just goes right into number 6, the question number 6 about how do you build trust, with the community, showing that good stewardship like you guys were talking about, making choices that are going to prove to show that you've chosen quality in the long, for over the years. Anything else on the bond issue? And Dr. Shaw, you also mentioned that earlier about, sort of getting the trust of the community, getting the communication out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one factor in why bond issues don't pass is trust, 100%, and it's trust or the lack of trust, maybe because you haven't done in the past, or people don't feel like you haven't done in the past what you've said you're going to do. Maybe there's not the level of transparency that people feel like there needs to be. You absolutely have to be an open book, and so as we work through this bond issue, that the plan is that by the end of 2022, all of our projects are completed. And so what Shawn had mentioned earlier, I think the KY3 story that he was probably talking about was the fact that, because the projects have come in under budget and the interest earned and some commitment that the district made out of capital, we were able to take 2 projects essentially off of our second phase and add to this bond issue. And so we feel very strongly about not only are we going to be able to deliver every single thing that we promised that we would within this bond issue, but we're actually getting more accomplished than we thought that we would. And so when we go back to the voters in 2023, which at that time would be a no tax increase and about $125 million worth of projects. So it's a smaller issue. We feel very good about the fact that we are delivering every single thing that we said we were going to deliver. And we are very fiscally responsible with the projects because we're getting more accomplished than we initially said that we felt like we could get. So it's really a matter of, that trust is a matter of doing what you say you're going to do. We're in the season of people making promises right now and what they're going to do when they get into office. And we as Americans have to hold people accountable. It's no different in local politics and local schools. People will hold your feet to the fire. And that's one of the great things about this community task force on facilities. We meet with that group twice a year and we update them on the work that's being done, the work that they put their names behind and went out and campaigned as well for the school district. And that group of 30 people, they're holding us accountable along the way to make sure that we're doing what we said that we're going to do. And they are a voice that really is able to spread out into the community from all parts, the north, south, east, and west of the city. They've been such a huge factor in spreading that consistent information. And then when people ask about the progress, we've been giving them the updates that they need, and they're able to provide that information as an extension to the district. And so I think that's having that accountability is huge, and it makes all the difference when you want to go out again and get support from your community.
Guys, this is a really important point. I think everyone needs to think about what Dr. Shaw talked about, and then Dr. Henson alluded to it, I think, in the answer, and that is, talking to those folks, and then I'm about ready to go on tour. And what I mean by that is, I can't really sing that good, unfortunately, but I'm going to go now to the garden club, and the Elks and the Lions and the Shriners. And then you go and you let those folks know what you did, whether it's in Springfield with the task force or in Benton County with the Benton County Republican women who are pretty important here, and you tell them what you did, you show them, and you thank them, because you don't want them, the one time they see is when you need something, you want something. And so going to those things and being involved in the community, and then following up, like Travis said, like Shaw said, hey, that's really, really important. And then you got that trust, right? So the next time it becomes hopefully a little bit easier for you.
I think we're doing really well on time here. We're down to the last question, and I want to thank Pete. He's the one who submitted these questions.
Good job, Pete.
Yeah, great questions. You bet.
I want to brag on him a little bit too. He's very interested in this class. He's
Pete, what is your current role right now?
So right now, thank you, Dr. Grover. My role right now, I'm a 5th grade teacher, so it's my 14th year teaching. So this class has been fascinating to me because for me, I've always looked at it through a teacher's lens, so instructionally especially. And so when I started learning more about the managerial side, which I never really thought of, it kind of became fascinating starting to read these things that we were reading about and thinking about things in a totally different perspective, one I haven't thought about before. And I appreciate all your information because it's connecting so well with like assignments we do and the things we read. So this is just really helpful. So I appreciate all this information. It's really eye-opening and very just meaningful based on the things we're learning and the assignments that we're completing.
Good.
That's good to hear.
I got a quick question. If if we've got time for a question. As a first-year building principal,
How's it going over there, John?
I tell you, picked a great year to start that journey of my career. You talk
I
about
stopped in the other day for a coffee, but I couldn't find my mask.
You talk about in an election year with COVID, it's a challenge for sure. But speaking of COVID, some things that we have encountered are, and I'm interested to hear from your guys' perspective, how that has impacted some of your short-term capital improvement projects. I know for us in our district, we have decided to push some things off because of some budget shortfalls that we anticipate, especially with the increase. I know for us, and Dr. Shaw, it's a little different for you, but for us in our district, we rely on launch and have have had to increase that portion of the budget quite a bit. So we're taking and that's impacting some of the projects that we were planning for this year.
You know, we as far as capital projects, we budget in the neighborhood. It's around, I want to say, with technology and everything, I want to say we are somewhere around about 10 million a year, and which is really not a lot in a budget that's 300 million. But you know, of that, I lost about 800,000 they cut from our capital. But one of the things that's impacted Springfield quite a bit, and it will impact, is that, you know, when school started, our enrollment was drastically less. I mean, we were probably 1,500 students less district-wide, and about 1,000 of those chose to homeschool. And so, I don't know if you've done your, you know, finance class yet, but 100 or 1,500 kids, that's in the neighborhood of, you know, $10 million in lost revenue. So that has a factor. Now, obviously, CARES Act funds have helped with a lot of those things, but that's really how it's impacted our short-term capital, is that, you know, we had to make some cuts there, and we didn't get to do some of the things that we would normally do on an annual basis because of those cuts. So,
Travis, do you think cut is the right word, or reposition? Because I think that reinforces how important it is to have a plan and have the steps so you know where you're going. When you got a great bid on a project and had some extra money, you were able to move some projects back a little bit and do them sooner. But now, when COVID hit, and nobody could predict that, that's going to knock everybody for a loop. Then, you know what? Some of our projects, we may have to stretch them out a little further too. We may have to push this a little down the road, always watching our lifespan, because we don't want to get behind on maintenance.
And you're right. We didn't actually cut it. You know, I was given the task of where can I remove some of those funds. And so for us, the easy thing was in some of the equipment budgets that we have. And so, for example, you know, we have a rotation every year for buying cafeteria tables, and that's about 110,000 a year that we do that with. Well, this year we decided we weren't buying any new cafeteria tables at all. And so we just bumped that back a year. So then those schools that are in line, they're going to have to wait a year. And we didn't, you know, we reduced some of our kitchen equipment budgets and some of our custodial equipment budgets, some of those things, not supplies, not the stuff that keeps places clean, but replacing some of the equipment. So some of those things that we did push back a little bit. Now, COVID has affected.
It's all part of the long plan. See, they've got a long-term plan to think about, so you can adjust those time blocks a little bit if a crisis happens. I mean, you know, Joplin didn't wake up one day without a high school or an elementary too after a tornado, but it did. And lots of things changed in their world. But even on a small scale, stuff can happen like that, and you just got to be flexible for it. And really, it's a little off topic. It goes back to your superintendent, but as a critical reason to have some reserve in your budget too. You know, I mean, back in the days when times were really, really lean. In fact, John, there were a few years that I was the lowest per pupil school in the state, and Republic was second. So I mean, we were at the bottom of the heap in the entire state. All of those times, we still had a little bit of reserve, because you just can't run that tightrope because you don't know what's going to happen, and then you're in deep trouble after that. So a little off topic, but it goes hand in hand with it, keeping some reserve for emergencies and being able to be flexible at least in the short and mid-range end of the plan.
Absolutely. And John, and everybody's got their own story and issues in their district. When we ran a bond, we really need a new turf field. It's done for. But there's a lot of backstory there. Oh, all these people are supposed to donate, and then they didn't, and we got caught on the hook, and so a lot of bad taste in some people. So when I went to hey, we're not going to do anything with a football field. Okay, that's not what this bond money's for. So now we got this extra money. Man, we really could use that, right? But I don't think I'm going to be able to do that from the PR standpoint of it. So I'm going to have to, going back to that trust and no long-term plan, right? So now I'm going to have to dip in here and do some kind of maybe 3-year lease to pay for this upgrade, when really, doggone it, if things have been done right and planned for, this could have been in our bond, and I wouldn't have had to mess with it at all. So we're getting CARES money. We're hoping, looking at my budget, that's going to kind of offset the launch and the other things. But some of these things, like just on a smaller scale, we kind of had to put off for a year. So that's part of it. And Dr. Henson's on the money, and we didn't have that here. We're just getting now where we had a $1.2 million deficit on a $13 million budget 4 years ago. Man, that's tough, right? So, but now we're in the black. It hurts, and so that's why that planning's so critical. If you don't do it right in facilities, it catches up with you big time.
Right.
That's a great question, though.
Yeah, COVID's one of those things, John, that makes the guy glad he's retired. Oh, wait.
Yeah, right. Looking pretty smart. Looking pretty smart.
Well, guys, we're coming up on 9 o'clock, and I would stay here for another hour and listen to you all talk and ask questions. But I did set the time for that. I do want my students to know that I have recorded this, and so I will make the recording available on Canvas so that you all can see it, and those who weren't able to join us for the live discussion this evening will be able to see it. And I also want to be sure to thank Dr. Henson and Dr. Shawn, Dr. Poyser for joining us this evening. These 3 gentlemen have all taught the facilities class when we were live and in person here in the Southwest area. And I know they know their stuff. They know what they're talking about. I also know that they're generous educators, like most educators are. So keep their names in mind. And if you have questions that you want to get answers to, I'm sure any one of them would be happy to visit with you. Dr. Shaw is in Springfield right now. Dr. Poyser is in Warsaw right now. And Dr. Henson is just rhenson@lindenwood.edu. So everybody knows that little line there. And I'm sure that they would be happy to assist you in any way, answer questions and all for you about things, not only about buildings, but lots of other stuff about education and schools. So I want to thank all of you guys for joining in this evening. And I really do appreciate it. And this has been our only live Zoom session for this course because of the type of course it is. So I'm glad everybody that participated was able to. So
thanks for having us, Dr. Grover.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Had a good
have a
time.
great winter, you all, if I don't see you.
okay.
Good luck, everyone.
Okay.
Absolutely.
John, I'll pop in one of these days. And you and Nikki need to talk to me about getting your EDD started.
We're ready.
Okay. See you. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.